The intro to this arrangement illustrates the point that I have made in the verbal introduction that I also made in this earlier in the lesson, and that is that I incorporate some of the elements of the original version, but I make them into my own. And as I mentioned, the intro goes to that point because I play indeed what the original plays, which is a sequence of two measures of a G major 7 of some kind, of any kind, and then two measures of D7 of some kind, and repeat. Two measures of G, two measures of D7, and then the melody starts. But of course, in the original version, there is a little bit of a signature sound, which I did not do. I did something more along the lines of melody. Whereas the original did something with a little bit of a signature sound, which again, I decided for my purposes not to incorporate because I wanted to give it more of the feel of a jazz musician covering a song. But nevertheless, just in case you wanted to emulate to some degree the original intro, I can mention that you play a G major 7, again, of your choosing, and we'll look into some specific fingerings in a moment. And then what is that? It is a series of parallel thirds against the D, and that is the D7 in a sense. And why does that work? Because what is this parallel of major thirds? These are notes from the whole tone scale. And starting, let's say, with the D, well, let's say the D because it is the root of the 7th chord, that we have the D, the E, which is the 9th, the F sharp, which is the major third, the G sharp, which is the flat 5 or sharp 4. Then you have a B flat or A sharp, which is the sharp 5 or flat 6. And then the C. And then D again. And what this means is that none of these notes are an avoid note as far as a D7 is concerned. You can play any of them randomly in any order, and the most famous of these is this augmented shape. It's augmented because the 1, 3, and not the 5, but rather an augmented 5. So it's not a 7th chord outright, but the sound of it qualifies and works as a 7th chord. And what Stevie Wonder has done is to take these notes and sequence them in such a way to create a little inner melody which ultimately just represents a D7. And that's why I don't play it, and I play instead some other variation on a D7 chord. So in other words, I'm aiming for the function of the chord rather than the specific line. Nevertheless, just to show you this little passage, it's the D in the bass because it's a D7, and you start with the top note. Now you can play this interval, this thirds. You can play other intervals in the scale. You can also play it this way. Or this also works. As I said, really any random combination of the notes in the scale will give you this augmented or whole tone scale sound. The simplest one to play is probably with thirds. You can move entire triads like this. That works as well. That's 3 notes moving in parallel. Again, let's focus just on the simplest of these scenarios, in which the top note is a D, and you can play it anywhere you want, but in this case, 2nd string, 3rd fret, along with the B flat just on the 3rd string on the same fret. So that creates a major third, and now you're playing parallel major thirds, so you can move it all on the same string. Or you can switch to the upper 2 strings at any moment you want. So any point in this motion is a point where you can jump from the set of strings 3 and 2 to strings 2 and 1. You can do it here. You can do it here. Or here. Or here. Whichever is more convenient to you. The point is just to move these parallel notes once, twice, 3 times, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, until you reach this note. So in sequence, and of course you're moving all in steps. And anytime you make the jump from these 2 strings to these 2 strings, you have to move back from these frets to these frets, or from these frets to these frets, or from these to these. And just as a specific example, let's say you're doing it here. So, and at this point, when you're playing F sharp and D on strings 2 and 3 on the 7th fret, you'll make the jump to strings 2 and 1, G sharp and E on strings 1 and 2, frets 4 and 5, and continue from there. Anyway, this was all about something that I did not do, so let's talk now about what I actually did do. You are now free to choose any kind of G major 7 you'd like. I picked something in this region, which is nice and has a pleasing sound, and includes an open string, G in the bass, F sharp, 4th string, 4th fret, open G, and this D right here. You can even throw in the E on top. And your first finger can even, if you play this with a thumb, your first finger can even get the F sharp, and you can play with the notes around and improvise with it. And in fact, notice this arpeggiation. This also goes back to the introduction, where arpeggiation helps you move things along in time. So I'm going to focus right now in this portion of the lesson on these 2 shapes, or 3, 2 or 3. This one that I mentioned, and also very similar to it, this one, which we're going to need anyway. Which is a bar on the 3rd fret, and then you have the notes G, F sharp, B, D, and G, all available to you in one fingering. And in fact, the pinky can even play the alternating bass note. I call it alternating because you're not going to want to play these 2 at the same time, but you can alternate between the 1 of the chord, the root of the chord, and its 5. It's the most common substitute bass note, alternating bass note, would be the 5 of the chord. and two measures of that in any kind of rhythm, in any kind of way you want. You can just play a simple G like this if you'd like. It doesn't have enough or a lot of the color that the original has, but it's, you know, it's legitimate. I like to, one of the simplest things that you can do now is play this kind of chord, and this alone is kind of a D7 with an 11th flavor, and can't be easier to play really. It's just one finger across, and this is one of the easiest shapes you can probably play on the guitar, and represents a D7 with an 11th kind of a flavor. And it's just a finger across the upper 5 strings on the 5th fret. So you get the notes D, G, C, E, and A. And if you did nothing else, that would be fine. And notice I used an alternating bass here as well. When the root is on the 5th string, the 5 of the chord will be on the same fret string below. And that's all I'm doing. I'm just arpeggiating this. To make it a little bit more interesting, I kind of move the lines around a little bit. I use the remaining fingers from this bar to pluck out notes. Now, which notes? We are in the key of G now. We started with a G. That's the 1 and 5. There's no stronger connection in music, I think, between the root and its 5, sometimes referred to as the dominant 5 chord. So since we're in the key of G, any note that we want to use from the scale will automatically sound in the tonality. All these notes are in the key of G. Now, seeing that we also have an open D, we can do more. I took advantage of this open D and moved things around. These are parallel triads. In the key of G. Here's a D, here's a C, here's a B minor, and here is an E minor. These are all chords that are in the diatonic system of the key of G. I can't elaborate on this concept too much. But the idea is that you just, in this case, you play a D chord, and each note moves up to the next scale note in the key of G, and you'll automatically get all the chords that you want. If you do this, whoa, what's going on here? Something sounds wrong. Well, something sounds wrong because this note is not in the key of G. Your ear will correct itself, and then you'll find this note to be the correct note for the scale. And you can create some kind of a melody out of that. Another easy grab, grip type shape for a G major 7 chord or G chord. And the same thing. I'm just playing these 3 notes really. Then I'm playing scale notes. And you can do this from anywhere. You can do this with an inversion. You can do it here. You can do it here. Play any G major 7 or a related type chord that you can. G major 7, G6, G major 6, 6, 9, G major 9, and then add a note or two and just make a rhythm out of it. The rhythm is number 1 here. That's what we need to focus on. The intricacies of the notes that you can choose, it's nice, but it's secondary. So here's, according to all this, here's an acceptable or a similar, in fact, introduction to what I've done in the video, probably.